So, Nikta, I think we arranged that you're going to ask me a question, I think.
Cut, cut, cut. No,
Oh, that would have been so
wrong.
good. Is that what we were gonna do, right? Oh.
You were gonna do the intro, and then you were gonna explain that you've just done a bunch of engineering interviews and that you wanted to talk about it. And then I would stop you and say,
right.
Before you like start your rant, just explain to me what an engineering interview even is.
Okay. This is gonna make a great intro. Hi, welcome to the Nikta and Jason show. I'm Jason, this is Nikta. Today we're going to talk about interviews. I recently, due to coronavirus, got laid off and had to do a number of interviews at various companies, and I'd like to talk about it.
Maybe before you launch into the inevitable rant, Jason, could you outline for those of us who are not engineers what kind of like the standard format is for engineering, or like was there a big variety from the different places that you interviewed, or was it all kind of like, you know, very similar across the board?
In terms of format, almost identical everywhere. And in terms of content, there's a lot of similarities. And you know, I have some thoughts on them, but I'm probably about to rant on them because I don't think I did that well for most of them. And so I'm all sore about that, and I want to rage against the system.
The system, yeah.
Anyway, so the format.
What's the format? Yeah, like what? Yeah.
So, you know, regardless of how, you know, your resume gets to a recruiter, the first step is you talk to the recruiter, and you're going to they're going to make sure that your resume, that you know your resume, that you match your resume. And they, you know, that's the first step. Second step is you will do some kind of preliminary interview. Could be anything. It's typically a coding question, and then a few other questions about your work experience or what have you. That's an hour. It's typically with a hiring manager or a senior engineer. And then if you get past that step, it's going to be what's known as the on-site, although in these times it's the on-site. And that is I like to call it the interview gauntlet. You're given 5 to 6 interviews over the course of an entire day. They fly you in, they bring you down, you meet everybody, you see the place, that type of thing. And so you'll go through, talk to 6 people over the course of the day. And then typically at that point, it's an offer after, should you be successful. That's the typical format. And it was the case, I think, pretty much for every place I applied to. Sometimes you'll get a coding or a take-home exam type of thing, but that's it.
And then so like the content, especially for the on-site, that sounds like it's more of like the heavy day, right? Where you're talking to a ton of people. And is that where you get a lot of like those like whiteboard engineering questions, or like, do you do like pair programming or?
So that's where it varied. What I found at this time was a lot of them just defaulted to, you know, some of them we had great conversations about the role of QA, or, you know, what do you do with product management? When do you want to talk to them? And I have an answer for that because it's recorded.
And subscribe to the Nikta and Jason show?
That I did mention that at a couple places. Yeah.
Maybe that's why you got rejected. Okay.
Maybe. So, but no, I think I got rejected because of these algorithm questions. They'd always ask me these like leetcode.com. You could go to leetcode.com and search for these questions and find them. They'd ask me these questions, and I wasn't kind of expecting it because, like, I've done tons of interviews, and I wouldn't ask these questions of a senior app developer because it's just not relevant to the job at all. And I didn't do any prep for these things, so maybe I should have. And I would take too long on them because I hadn't done any of that kind of stuff forever and ever. So I had to like go back to first principles and solve it there. And I do that. I'd solve it there, but it would take too long, and so I wouldn't quite finish. And the trick is to memorize all these questions and like do them all before you do that, before you go to these interviews. And you know, another colleague did that. He was bashing away on these LEET code problems, and he got he got through all the interviews, got tons of offers, looked like he was very, you know, accomplished developer. But he just practiced these questions. He'd just been exposed to them. That was it. So I don't know. I find that to be and it's not a good proxy. It's not a good indication that you're going to be actually good at the job.
It sounds like studying for the SATs or something, you know, like it's not actually a reflection of your problem solving skills. It's just like, did you spend inordinate amounts of time working through practice problems? Yeah,
it's a rite of passage. And apparently there's some that you even like, you can't possibly solve them unless you've studied them. But what does that prove though? Like, I guess it proves something that you studied a problem and then came up with the answer. But you really need some like comp sci problem to do that. You could do that with a bunch of other things.
So is this something that's better maybe for like junior engineers who don't actually have a bunch of experience under their belts? Whereas like once you have built up this resume, it should, you know, they shouldn't be asking this.
Yeah, I think so. Because like, you know, there's a whole lot more to the job of a senior engineer than my algorithm skills. Like so much more. And to have the whole, like, to have your success, or to just like, you know, get the offer, to be solely reliant on these coding questions, like, I don't know, I find it suspect. There's something like fishy there. And it, like, you know, maybe that company or those interviewers aren't going through thinking about how to hire for a particular role, or they just default like dogmatically go to these coding questions because everybody does it, and then therefore it's safe, and so they don't have to think about it. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's probably more appropriate for juniors because they've just done that stuff at school, and so cool, they were paying attention in school. You figured it out.
And then how do they ever evaluate things like, because I imagine that so much of engineering is like problem solving, not in a vacuum, but using Google and reading some Stack Overflow posts and like, you know, swiveling your chair over and talking to your buddy. Like, so how do you assess that stuff in an interview context?
Right. Well, so a couple of places actually did that with me. So, you know, they're like, do whatever you need to solve this particular problem we're going to give you. Show a list of books. Okay, cool. From this list, from this JSON file. Bloop, did it, no problem. They're like, wow, shit. What are we going to do with the rest of the time? Like, that's how fast I did it. And there's a good like demonstration that actually happened. Yeah. There's a good demonstration of, you know, good concrete knowledge that I will take to and use every day. So there are people who do that, who do ask for those things, but I don't know. I mean, it's probably just because I'm like, I wanted to be drowning in offers and like beat all these companies away with a stick. No, you can't have me. And that's probably why we're talking about this today. It's just because I'm all like disappointed that didn't happen.
Jason's ego reared its head.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's about hiring. So before we talk about how I would actually interview somebody, let's switch it up a bit. PM interviews. So is there a format for those?
Do you even know what PM interviews entail?
I've actually interviewed candidates for product managers, so I know a little bit. Yeah.
Right. So you know about like your little 1 hour chunk as like a senior engineer talking to a PM to see.
Right, which totally matters. Like how they deal with engineers and, you know, examples of that. What, you know, that stuff I want to hear about. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So really quickly, very similar format to what you were saying. There's like first the recruiter call to just kind of talk about whether or not you'd be excited about the opportunity, what you're kind of looking for in your next role. Nice mug, by the way. and then followed by like a screener, usually with the hiring manager, to again just kind of suss out that you're not crazy and that it's worth investing the time to move forward and have you in for an on-site or like a full day thing. And then it's a series of interviews with, trying to think of what it was for me for the last time. Usually it's like tech managers, tech leads, a designer, maybe a researcher, and then again, like the hiring manager at the end of the day, and then maybe other product managers who would be on the team with you as well. So designers, product managers, tech leads, tech managers, like the whole gamut, right? You're talking to everybody. And it can be exhausting. And obviously there's no like algorithm questions or problem solving. I mean, I guess maybe unless you were interviewing for a highly technical product management role.
Why are manhole covers round?
Yeah.
How many gas stations are in the US?
We don't need to worry about that shit. Sometimes though, I've noticed this with some companies recently, is like they will also give you a take-home assignment and then you're supposed to do a presentation. And you do the presentation in front of like a panel of 4 or 5 people and they ask you questions. And the presentation is like sometimes around something like, pick a product that you love and talk about what new feature you would build and what the business opportunity would be, what the benefit would be to the user, things like that. And I don't like take-home assignments like that. Not because it creates a bunch of extra work for me, but because the type of product manager that I am is a very collaborative one, which is a good and bad thing. Sometimes I'm collaborative to a fault in the sense that it's like, oh my God, Nikta, just like take ownership and make a decision instead of always like trying to see what everybody wants. But it does make it very difficult to like dream up a feature by yourself, come up with the business use case, because that's not actually what I do day to day. Day to day, I try to like facilitate conversations and do user interviews and do market research. And so anyways, some of that is like encompassed in that take home assignment, but not all of it. And so that's the overall format. To me, it's like such a huge opportunity for the PM. Obviously, like if you're looking for a job and you need a paycheck, maybe it puts you in a slightly different position. But like there's such there's so much variety in how companies view product management. Some of them view us mostly as project managers. And you might be interviewing at a company where they expect you to just take the feature ideas that the CEO has and go and implement it. Other companies will want you to take complete ownership of a space, including things like strategy and the overall vision. And so then you're like doing more of what, in the first example, the CEO would be doing, right? So it varies so much from one to the next. Some PMs need to be much more technical because it's a more technical product. Some need to be much more user-centric and design savvy. So the interview to me is a big opportunity for me to try to suss out, what do these people think product management is? Which I think is probably different for you, Jason, because it's like, oh, if you're an iOS app developer, like maybe there's still questions about what does senior entail or what does a staff engineer entail? But you kind of have some idea, right? Like,
yeah. No, you have an idea of, you already know what you're going to be working on. It's going to be an app. But yeah, yes, that's a great, there's an opportunity for you to get a feel for, how are engineers viewed in the company? What does the process look like to make software look
right.
like?
Right.
How are engineers viewed? That's another good kind of thing to look for. And to your point, yes, I think large tech companies all look the same, but there's tons of jobs that aren't large tech companies. And so startups and agencies and of various sizes, like those all have different things that you want to look for and listen for. And you're going to be more of a cog in a large company than in a small one. And so, a startup interview should be way broad, very broad, because like there's so much to do, and it doesn't matter what you kind of get hired in as, you're probably going to do a lot of the work, so yeah. And I was kind of disappointed in the startups. They were kind of bog standard. Let's just copy the big tech companies and be even more strict. And that was kind of
Summer. So how would you run like your interviews when you're interviewing engineers or PMs for that matter?
Yeah, so a PM I didn't have that much experience with, and I kind of had a little bit of crisis of like, what do I even ask them? I don't know. But then I thought about, okay, well, if I'm the engineer dealing with this PM all the time, which I was going to be, how can we work together? And so I'll start from there, I guess. And in that case, I looked at what the team had and what we were lacking as a team. And then what could we find out of this in this product manager? So we were kind of like Spinal Tap with drummers with our product managers. Do you get that reference? Do you? No, you probably don't.
They keep having a different drummer all the time, right?
Yeah. Did you watch Spinal Tap?
No, I happen to know this one little trivia.
Yeah. Okay, so it's probably more. It's probably more famous for It Goes to 11 and the drummers than all the rest of it. But it's so funny. You should watch it. Anyway, we had a rotating, cast of PMs and for maybe like months at a time. So it's kind of up to us, and we had adapted, and we were pretty good on the product side, coming up with ideas that would help the users. We were good there. So we didn't need that. We were bad at kind of organizing it all, running the tests, getting the results back, reporting on those. That's what I was looking for. And like, how did you work with it? A strong engineering team that doesn't really need your product ideas. And so I'd ask them that. And I only got to do it a couple times, then coronavirus upset the whole thing. But
that just sounded like the most obnoxious thing ever. Like, how would you work with a really strong engineer like myself who doesn't need you at all, and we don't need you and we don't want you here, but maybe if you could do a little bit of administrative work for us to like organize our shit, because we have really great ideas and we don't need your ideas. And if you join the team, we don't actually want to hear your ideas. We just want to keep doing our own ideas, but we want you to do a little bit of the secretarial work of just like organizing our ideas. Okay. See, this is exactly why I'm saying the product manager needs to suss out bullshit like that.
It's not bullshit. It was the place in the team, and then you can kind of introduce them to the rest. So you're going to be hiring a junior PM in that case, and that's what we were looking for. I wouldn't interview the same. I would even say, like, I argued for this. Like, we don't need a senior PM in our case. We were doing most of it ourselves at that point. So let's look for this particular person, less experienced PM who's keen, who wants to like learn the role, and they get introduced to things. That's kind of what we're looking for. And I'm saying it glibly here, but I'm not going to tell them that. I'm going to...
Hey, whatever. Moving on to engineering interviews.
Okay, so for whatever role we're going to look for, we do the same thing. Assess the team, assess what the team needs. There are a few general things you need to be a software developer. So yes, you're going to ask them a coding question. I tend to favor ones that are practical, that I've found myself that I can solve really quickly, and then you see how they do it. So I've kind of got my favorite question there, and that's it. And like you get, if they get the answer, cool. Even if they don't have the answer, are they on the way? Great. But you have to assess them in other areas, because it can't just be that. And you're interviewing this person in a moment in time. So you have to be aware that they're not going to be the same person from when you interviewed them to even when you hire them. And then a year later, like, can this person grow and learn and, learn outside and push back on the things I'm telling them because they've seen other viewpoints? Can they communicate? That's another thing. I'll try and listen for. Tell me about your experiences now, or tell me about your current role, and then just let them blather, just to hear what they kind of emphasize and how they're talking to me. That type of that's what I'll look for, though, is like various qualities beyond the coding test. Like if they bail the coding test, then
yeah. But so I mean,
I'd say.
I don't know if we need a whole separate episode on this topic, because I could talk about this for a while, and this feels like it's already been a long episode. But what you're talking about now makes me think of that whole thing of like, oh, are they a good fit or a good cultural fit or whatever?
Uh, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm looking for a cultural fit. I'm saying, do they have this at this moment in time? Do they have the skills for the role? Not necessarily cultural fit,
Okay.
but
Okay. Fair
I
enough.
think
Yeah.
I know where you're going. And go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so what you're saying is really, so the reason I think of it is because, in some recent conversations that I've had with people, I've realized how difficult it can be for some who maybe actually come like literally from different cultures around the world and stuff, right? To talk themselves up, to know what you're looking for when you ask a question, like tell me about your current role. Um, let me give you, I'm kind of rambling here, but like, let me give you an example, which is that in some cultures, it's actually looked favorably on for you to say challenge figures of authority. So if you're my boss and you say we should do this, and I say, no, Jason, that's a bad idea for these reasons, that's something that's viewed as a positive thing because we have that culture and we value that kind of thing. Whereas in other cultures, that would be absolutely not, the norm. And so if your manager or boss was to tell you to do a thing, you would just do that thing, and you would kind of, obedience is something that's valued more highly. And so it can sometimes be difficult for different people who are in these interview contexts to know what is valued.
Yeah.
Not just by, like North American culture, but also by that company's culture.
Right.
And all too often people use things like, oh, this person wasn't a cultural fit. I used to hear expressions like, could you have a beer with this person and
Yeah.
kind of get along with them? And it's like, oh my God, like what a terrible way of promoting tech bro culture and making people who don't want to shoot the shit with you over a beer feel completely excluded,
Okay. That's not a good, yeah, those aren't good questions. You're not looking for the job. You're looking, would I have a beer with this person? Like, who gives a shit? You're going to work with this person.
Right. And it's just riddled with bias, right? It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah,
you have beers with people who are like yourself, who look like you, who think like you, who talk like
right.
you, who act like you, and that's not going to necessarily make for the best team. So, I've seen things at companies that I've worked at where it's more like there's like a framework in terms of like company values, right? Like the company really values people who are constantly wanting to learn and never feel like they've, actually achieved a certain amount of learning. And so does this person portray those qualities? Do they seem like they're constantly trying to brush up on their skills, right?
Right.
So I find that kind of useful to have like a very specific set of questions that define what cultural fit
Yes.
is.
Yeah. I agree. I think, because there are bias. Everyone's got biases, right? And you want to not, again, depends on the company. In a giant company, you don't want anyone's individual biases kind of getting in the way. And so, yes, and you should have like an explicit, you can't give interviews until you get this kind of seminar on how to interview at company.
Amen.
And this is what we want to look for. This is what we don't want, these types of things. And so, that definitely. And I think, I'm looking for those. So when I was interviewing and at this company, I'm looking for those values that the company values. And it's kind of like you sometimes have to make a bad question is, I'd say a bad interview question is, we value transparency. How are you transparent? Like, you're like leading them to the thing. You don't necessarily want to tell them you're looking for it. But if someone asked, like, tell me about your latest role, if I said that to them and they'd ask, well, what do you mean? Like how I work with people? Yeah. What I did? Yeah. I'm fine with that. Them, it's not a trick, and I don't want to make it like a trick. Like I've had people like, here's this particular problem. And then, I'll ask questions about it and they're like, I don't know. And it's like, come on, don't try and trick me here. Are you really going to be like that day to day? Then I don't want to work with you. Like, anyway. What was I going to talk about? So we're leading to another place, which is kind of like, that comes up a lot, especially now, diversity and stuff like that. And yeah, your interview process should absolutely, well, again, if the company values diversity, the company has to do something to, get that diversity. And I've kind of been, comes up on Twitter and stuff like that, especially now. So, and one thing I read was that, by the time the engineers, like say I'm doing a screening interview, it's already like, you have to go after not just the engineers who are asking these questions about their biases and give them a framework, but it's same with the recruiters.
Mm-hmm.
It's even there. It's going to be really hard with the recruiters because they might just be told only hire people from Stanford and MIT and, the Ivy League or whatever, which is dumb. Don't do that. But that's a possibility. Right. And so then they're just going to screen everyone else out and you're never going to hear about it. So the whole hiring process has to be kind of explicitly examined to see if you aren't hiring for a diverse workforce. And the other thing I think, if you can't just like judge it on the color of the people's skin, right? So in either way, like, we're not going to hire people of color, or we are going to hire people of color. You still need qualified people. And so I don't know what you can do to remove those biases, but it's going to be hard because can't necessarily rely on their intuition if there's this implicit or unconscious bias. And so how do you suss that out? I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Yeah. It's hard, but also like sometimes it's just not hard. It's like first step one, acknowledge that you have biases. Literally, so many people fail at that step. They're like, I don't see color, I don't see this, or I don't see that, or I don't see gender, or whatever. And it's like, okay, well that's a problem. Like let's start from right there. And there are plenty of consultants now and little like online courses and stuff that you can take that's like implicit bias training and how to recognize it in yourself and stuff like that. Recruiter being told to only hire from Stanford and MIT because it might not even be that explicit, but the recruiter might have had really great luck up until now, grabbing people from the MIT and Stanford pool.
Yeah. Or all the other big tech companies that have the same kind of issue. And so then you can't blame the pipeline.
Exactly. And so it requires more work to go like beyond the stuff that like traditionally works so well, especially as a recruiter, right. You're getting compensated based on like how quickly you're bringing people into the door who are, working out well. It's I think also about setting up, incentives, because that's the reason why the recruiter would keep going back to like the traditional stuff that works is because their incentives are in line with doing so.
Right.
But Jason, I feel like this, it's been a long episode, so much to say on diversity. I'm sure we could do another episode on it.
We could.
Here's what I want to know. I want to know in the comments what people's interview experiences have been, whether you're the one doing the interviewing or if you are the interviewee.
Tell us horror stories. I want to hear horror stories.
I want to hear the horror stories. I want to hear the good stories. I want to hear if you had to estimate the number of gas stations in North America, if you had to answer why manholes are round.
Or to test a salt shaker.
Tell us about your goofiest interview question, please. And smash that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.
Bye.